Robert Redford was never just an actor. He was a symbol of American cinema, the golden-haired star who carried the charm of the West and the mystery of the outsider. For decades, he stood at the center of Hollywood, but he was never consumed by it. He lived his life with one foot in the spotlight and the other in the shadows, always protecting his private world. He built a career that made him one of the most respected actors in history. From Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to The Sting, Redford created characters that stayed alive in the memories of millions. But his true story was not just about fame or films. It was about a man who carefully built an empire far beyond Hollywood's lights. From the earliest years of his career, Redford was different from other stars. Many of his colleagues chased the fame, the parties, the money. Redford, however, was careful. He valued the freedom of independence more than the flash of Hollywood. He was not only an actor but a thinker, an artist, and a man who wanted to leave a real mark on the world. What most people did not know was how deeply he invested in his future. While many actors burned through their millions, Redford quietly bought land, supported projects, and created one of the most powerful cultural institutions in America, the Sundance Institute. He was never wasteful. He always thought of the future, of his children, of what his life's work would mean after he was gone. As years went by, Redford became more private. He avoided the gossip, the scandals, the chaos of Hollywood. He moved to Utah, where he could live among the mountains and keep his distance from the madness of fame. There, he found peace and also built his vision of Sundance, a place where independent voices could shine. His family always knew he was careful with money, but they never fully understood the scale of what he had built. To them, he was a husband, a father, and a grandfather. His work was part of who he was, but his family was his center. He gave his children values of independence, honesty, and humility. He never wanted them to grow up spoiled by fame or fortune. Yet, behind the quiet smile and soft words, Robert Redford was leaving behind something so large, so unexpected, that even his closest family would one day be brought to tears. His wealth was not just in dollars but in the land, the art, the investments, and the influence he had built over a lifetime. What makes Redford's story so powerful is that he never bragged about it. He never lived like a billionaire, though by the end of his life, his fortune was close to that mark. He wore simple clothes, lived in the mountains, and often avoided the red carpets. To the world, he seemed almost modest. But his legacy was far bigger than anyone imagined. When we look back at his films, we see a man who played gamblers, cowboys, con men, and leaders. But when we look at his life, we see a man who played the greatest role of all, the protector of his legacy. He left behind not only memories and movies but also a financial fortune that secured his family for generations. Still, this fortune was not just about numbers. It was tied to his love for art, for nature, and for independence. Every dollar he earned seemed to find its way into something greater. And in the end, when his family discovered the true size of what he left behind, it shocked them in a way they never expected. Robert Redford had lived his life preparing for this moment. He believed in leaving behind something that would outlast him. For his children and grandchildren, the discovery was overwhelming. It was not just money. It was the story of who he was, told through the fortune he carefully built with patience and wisdom. When Robert Redford passed, the world mourned the loss of a Hollywood legend. But for his family, the shock came not only from grief. It came from what he left behind. For decades, they had known him as a careful man, someone who avoided waste and lived with quiet dignity. Yet they had no idea of the size and depth of the empire he had built. The first surprise came with the properties. Redford had always loved land. He believed nature was the greatest wealth a man could ever own. Over the years, he had quietly purchased large pieces of land in Utah, New Mexico, and California. The family knew of the house in Sundance, but they did not know the full scope. His real estate holdings alone were worth hundreds of millions. Every piece of land had a story. The mountains in Utah were not just property, they were his sanctuary. The desert lands in New Mexico carried his love for art and history. The California estate tied him back to the roots of Hollywood but also stood as a reminder of the price of fame. To his children, discovering the size of these holdings was overwhelming. They realized that their father had been preserving pieces of America itself. But it was not only about land. Redford had built an empire through Sundance. What started as a small dream grew into one of the most powerful cultural forces in cinema. The Sundance Film Festival was now an institution, one that shaped the careers of countless filmmakers. It carried his name and his vision, and it generated wealth and influence that stretched far beyond what most of Hollywood imagined. Through Sundance, Redford left behind more than just money. He left a stage for independent voices, a platform for the next generation of dreamers. For his family, this was perhaps the most emotional inheritance. They knew the festival had value, but they never fully understood how deeply it had changed the industry, how much power and wealth it carried. Then came the investments. Redford had quietly put money into businesses, art, and causes he believed in. Unlike many actors who wasted fortunes, he had turned his earnings into lasting wealth. His portfolio included stocks, companies, and collections that few knew about. For his children, going through these details was like opening a treasure chest that never seemed to end. The art collection alone was staggering. Redford had always loved painting and collecting. He valued not only famous names but also unknown artists. His walls carried stories, and his collection was now worth millions. Each piece revealed his quiet passion for beauty, for capturing life on canvas, for holding on to meaning beyond words. His family, standing before these works, often wept. They realized this was not only wealth but also memory. The discovery of his will was the most emotional moment. Redford had written it with care. He divided his fortune in ways that reflected his values. Each child received more than money. They received responsibility. He asked them to protect Sundance, to continue his love for the land, to ensure that his work would not be lost to greed. He left behind instructions that reminded them of who he was, a man of principle, not excess. His grandchildren, too, were included. He wanted them to have security, but more than that, he wanted them to understand where it came from. He asked his family to teach the younger ones about independence, about honesty, about living with humility even in wealth. For them, this was perhaps the greatest shock of all, to see how deeply he had thought about their future. The tears flowed not only because of the numbers but because of the meaning behind them. Every dollar, every piece of land, every artwork carried his touch. His family realized that he had been preparing for this moment all along. They had thought of him as a great actor, but now they saw him as something more, a guardian of his legacy. The truth is that Robert Redford's fortune was estimated at nearly $200 million by the time of his death. But for his family, it felt like much more. It was not the amount that mattered. It was the way it reflected his life. He had lived quietly, simply, and yet he had built something that would carry his name for generations. Some in the family were left speechless. They could not believe the scale of what he had left behind. Others felt pride, remembering his words about independence and strength. But all of them felt the weight of responsibility. Redford had not left them wealth to enjoy carelessly. He had left them a mission. The greatest shock came when they learned about his donations. Even after securing his family, Redford had left large portions of his fortune to causes he believed in. He gave to environmental groups, to education, to art. His will revealed that he wanted his legacy to stretch beyond blood,